afternoon. Thank you for coming. My name is Charlie Spano. I chair the 9/11 Memorial Committee. I want to welcome all of you to this public reading of the Declaration of Independence 246 years ago today. At this time, it was read aloud on the steps of Independence Hall in Philadelphia. There were other subsequent public readings of the Declaration of Independence, including one ordered by the Commanding General of the Continental Army on July 8th. The Declaration was read to his troops. I want to introduce as our first reader, Grace Castellano, who will get us started.
In Congress, July 4th, 1776, the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. When the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with one another, and to assume among the powers of the earth and the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of God's nature entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to seem to them most likely to effect their safety and happiness.
Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. And accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms in which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariable the same objects, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future securities. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world.
He has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained. And when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people unless those people should relinquish their right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only.
He has refused for a long time, after such disillusions, to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise. the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions from within. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose obstructing the laws for naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of land. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers.
He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. He has effected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to his jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us.
For protecting them by a mock trial for punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving of us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for abolishing the free systems of English law in neighboring provinces and establishing therein an arbitrary government and enlarging its boundaries so that as it is to render at once an example for and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies.
For taking away our charters, abolished our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of government, for suspending our legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. He has abdicated government here and declared us out of his protection and waging war against us. He plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed our lives of our people. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of the death, destruction, tyranny already begun, with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages and totally unworthy of head of citizen nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens, taken captive of our high seas, to bear arms against their country, to become an executors of their friends and brethren, for all themselves by their hands. He has executed domestic insurrection amongst us and has endowed to bring our inhabitants of our frontiers and mercenaries, Indian savages who known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions.
In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for the readiness in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince, whose character is thus marked by every act which may be defined a tyrant. It is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Nor have we been wanting in attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our immigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured them by their ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They too must bend deaf to the voice of justice and consanguinity. We must, therefore, acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation and hold them as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace, friends.
And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Signed by order and in behalf of the Congress, John Hancock, President, attested by Charles Thompson, Secretary. That is the reading of the public reading of the Declaration of Independence. There are additional things to be read. I'm going to call on some students from the Peckville Assembly of God, because one of the things that most people do is stop at the line we just read. Our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. But it's instructive to note what that actually meant to the 56 people who signed the Declaration. Matthew? Say Delaware.
Delaware. George Reed, Cecil Rodney, Thomas McKean. Pennsylvania. George Clymer, Benjamin Franklin, Robert Morris, John Morton, Benjamin Rush, George Ross, James Smith, James Wilson, George Taylor. Massachusetts. John Adams, Samuel Adams, John Hancock, Robert Treat Payne, Elbridge Gary, New Hampshire. Josiah Bartlett, William Whipple, Matthew Thornton.
Okay.
Rhode Island, Stephen Hopkins, William Ellery. New York, Lewis Morris, Philip Livingston, Francis Lewis, William Floyd. Georgia, Button Gwinnett, Lyman Hall, George Walton. Virginia, Richard Henry Lee, Francis Lightfoot Lee, Carter Braxton, Benjamin Harris, Thomas Jefferson, and George Wythe.
Thank you. Victoria?
North Carolina, William Hooper, John Penn, John Joseph Hughes. South Carolina, Edward Rutledge, Arthur Middleton, Thomas Lynch Jr., Thomas Hayward Jr. New Jersey, Abraham Clark, John Hart, Francis Hopkins, Richard Stockton, John Witherspoon. Connecticut, Samuel Huntington, Roger Sherman, William Williams, Oliver Wolcott. Maryland, Charles Carroll, Samuel Chase, Thomas Stone, and William Paca.
Thank you. We're going to restate one important paragraph of the Declaration. Victoria?
We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress, assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world, for the rectitude.
All
our intentions,
do
in the name, by the authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right, ought to be free and independent states. That they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain and it is ought to be totally dissolved. And that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliance, establish commerce, and to do all the acts and things which independent states may of right do.
Thank you, Victoria. The names of the people who signed the Declaration were just read to you. There were 56. They didn't know how it was going to turn out, but they realized that they're putting their lives on the line, literally. Of the 56 who signed the Declaration, 9 fought in the Revolutionary War and were killed. 5 signers were captured by the British as traitors, tortured as traitors, and then died. 2 of them had sons in the Revolutionary Army who were also killed. 12 had their homes ransacked and burned. 8 more had their homes and buildings looted by Tories or English soldiers. Thomas McKean was so hounded by the British, who were trying to capture him, that he was forced to move his family from one hiding place to another. His home and possessions were taken from him, and he died in poverty. Carter Braxton of Virginia, a wealthy trader and planter, had his fleet of ships sunk by the British Navy. He sold his home and properties to pay his debts and died in poverty. Some voluntarily gave all they possessed. Thomas Nelson Jr. at the Battle of Yorktown learned that Lord Cornwallis was using his house as his headquarters. He urged the American army to bombard it, and it was burned. He died bankrupt. Some had the heartbreak of having wives die from the fighting. Francis Lewis went into hiding from the English forces, seeking to find him and kill him as a traitor. His home and properties were destroyed. The English jailed his wife as a traitor, and she died within a few months. John Hart was driven by the oncoming English army from his wife's bedside as she was dying. He and his 13 children fled the house for their lives. His fields, his gristmill were burned. For more than a year, he lived in the forests and caves, returning home to find his wife dead and his children vanished. And that's what they meant by their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. God bless America. Fife and drum. Thank you. I want to acknowledge our readers today. In no particular order, Grace Castellano, wave Grace, Mark Myers, Kathy Zinski, Tom, and Butch Pagano. Melanie Nero. Where the other is? Victoria and Casey. Debbie and Dave Sawicki. Casey and Matthew. Both from Elisha, all from the Peckville Assembly of God up on Route 6. I hope I didn't miss anybody. No readers missed? Great. And our Fife and Drum group. Thank you, folks. Appreciate your attendance. Please come up and get a Constitution book and an American flag right here.